guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Nice to hear The Bright Side girl, and today I'm going to share with you some of my favorite dystopian novels. So these are going to be to help cure your possible hangover for Sunrise on the Reaping, which is a new prequel for the Hunger Games series that came out that has a lot of us in a chokehold. I recently read it and absolutely loved it. I talked about it in my March reading wrap-up, which I will link up in the cards as well as down below in the description. So some of you may be new to reading dystopian, or some of you may have gotten the bug again. I tend to read at least a couple dystopians every year. I just find them really fast-paced and engaging, and there's all different styles of dystopian reads. So I have a large stack of some of my favorites to share with you. There are some super popular ones that are not on this list because either I haven't read them yet or I didn't love them as much as some other people. Just kind of keep that in mind, but these are some of my very favorites, so I hope you enjoy. Alright, I'd be remiss if I did not talk about the Hunger Games. I know it seems silly to put this in here, but I feel like there are a lot of new readers that find my channel or just are diving into reading for the first time. So if you have not read the Hunger Games, this is one of the best places to start. I'm pretty sure this was the first ever dystopian I read. I was on the bandwagon for this one, so I read it shortly after it came out and then kind of kept up with the series. I have vivid memories of reading this book while swimming, of thinking about it while I was at a dinner, and I just couldn't wait to figure out what happened to these characters. So this is in a future focused around this harsh capital with 12 surrounding districts, and every year they host the Hunger Games, where they pick 2 kids 18 and under from each district to participate in the Hunger Games, where they fight to the death. And this is kind of to remind them of the wars that they went in and to kind of force them into being grateful, but also to kind of keep them in line. I don't want to say too much more because it's just one that you need to go into. I see a lot of people reading this one for the first time. I do recommend reading the full trilogy before you jump into the prequel books, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which follows President Snow's youth, and Sunrise on the Reaping. Even though these take place before the events of the Hunger Games, I feel like you won't appreciate them as much if you don't know the core story, because you need to kind of get attached or know of the characters before you jump into the prequels. That's just my personal opinion. Still one of my top 10 favorite trilogies books of all time. This holds a special place in my heart. Next up is Divergent by Veronica Roth. This one came out a few years after Hunger Games and also kind of took the world by storm. We got a really good first movie and then a really kind of crappy second and third movie, and then we never got the completion, which was so sad. This book was such a fun time. I will say that I enjoyed this first book the most. I still liked the second, and I actually did like the ending of the third, even though a lot of people were not happy with it. But this first book especially is so good. We're in this dystopian Chicago, and everything is segregated into 5 different factors, and each one contributes a different way into society. On everyone's 16th birthday, the teens must decide and determine which factor they want to go into through a series of tests and trials, and our main character Beatrice picks one that is unexpected and goes on this whole journey with it. There is a fun dystopian young adult romance in here, and what's really cool about this one is that Veronica wrote these when she was pretty close to being a teen herself, and so the writing was really impressive, especially for how old she was. I know her books have continued to get better as well, but if you haven't checked this one out, I definitely would at least read this first one because it's really good. Another kind of classic one is The Maze Runner, which I need to get a copy of this. I used to have one and I think I unhauled it in a move, even though I really loved it. The Maze Runner is part of a series. There are actually new books in this series that I want to check out. So this one is set in the future as well, and we're following Thomas, who wakes up in a lift. The only thing that he can remember is his name. He's surrounded by strangers and other boys whose memory is also gone. Outside, the towering walls that surround the glade that he is now in is a limitless, ever-changing maze. There's only one way out, and no one's ever made it through alive. Then a girl arrives in the glade, the first girl ever, and the message that she delivers is terrifying. Remember, survive, and run. Really cool. Such a good series. Very unique from the other dystopians that were out at the time. I personally enjoyed the movies better. However, I read the first book and then watched the movie, and then I watched the second and third movie before I read the book. I really liked the way the movies were done. Dylan O'Brien was in them. I thought they wrapped up nicely. They took a little bit of a different direction. I still really enjoyed the books. I do think I liked the second and third movie more than the second and third book, but it could be the order I read them in. This is just such a good time, and it's a really like fun mystery that you get to solve. And kind of bounce back and forth between the styles and the years. So something newer is Snow Globe by Soyoung Park. I've talked about this one a little bit recently. This one is a translated book. We are set in this like frozen version of our world, and it's very harsh and hard to live in, but there is a select group of people that film this TV show in the snow globe, and they get to live in luxury and warmth and kind of entertain the rest of the pitiful folks around them. And our main character works in this energy factory, kind of keeping things going, and she dreams of kind of one day going to Snow Globe. And it is so good. The second book comes out in May. Really excited about it. Extremely unique. The vibes of this one is very different than a lot of other dystopians. This original hardcover is also one of the prettiest books. It is so pretty. This is a perfect book for winter or any time of the year. I thought the ending was absolutely fabulous. Next, we have an adult read, and that is The One by John Mars. This is technically a standalone. However, there are two books set in this world that take place after the effects of the first book. They follow completely different characters, but they're in the world and they kind of carry on, which we'll talk about in a second. So it's not technically a dystopian world, but I feel like it gives kind of similar energy. We have developed this DNA research that will tell you who your person is, like who your spouse is going to be, who your ultimate the one is. And this causes a bunch of chaos because a lot of things happen with the development of this new research. So you have to decide whether you want to find out who your one person is. And you could find out that it is not the person that you married, or you could find out that it is someone that has died, or you could find out that it's someone you thought you wouldn't like, and all different kinds of outcomes, which is so interesting. I think we're following three main characters as they grapple whether they are going to find out who the one is for them and all the different situations that happen. It is so good. It's a little gritty. It's definitely darker. It's very fast paced. It's so engaging. The second book is called The Marriage Act, and there are all these like rules and regulations around marriage and how to have the perfect marriage, and things are kind of monitored. And then the third book is The Family Experiment, which I haven't read yet, and it has to do with the children. So they are following completely different characters and storylines, but they're all set in the same world and reference the effects of the other books. So really enjoy this one. Very unique. We have Plus One by Elizabeth Fama. I keep meaning to recommend this to you guys, but I haven't been able to pick a category until now to put it in. So this is a YA dystopian sort of standalone. So America is divided between people who work during the daytime and people who work and live during the nighttime, and their paths are not supposed to cross. Following Seoul, and she deliberately injures herself in order to gain access into a hospital to kidnap her baby niece in order to show her to her dying grandfather. And the kidnap goes awry, and she winds up having to become like a fugitive because she broke so many different rules. And she runs into Darcy Benoit, who is of the daytime side. They kind of join up together, and it's a really cool romance between day and night. Very unique, of such an interesting world. Next, we have The Giver by Lois Lowry, another classic. This is like a true classic, one of the like original dystopians. I did read this one in my 20s. I have a funny story about it. My boyfriend at the time was reading it to me, so it kind of colored my opinion of it after we broke up, but then I reread it and I fell in love with the full quartet. We're in this very strict future where birth mothers assign kids to different families. You are allowed one boy and one girl. They pick your spouses for you, and everything is very regulated. Everyone is basically the same except for Jonas, and Jonas is assigned a special task. He begins to work with a mysterious old man called The Giver and uncover more about the history of their world. Very unique. I feel like the basis for how a lot of our dystopians came around. This is such a good one and like a must for any dystopian lover. Eve by Anna Carey. This is the first again in a YA trilogy. A deadly virus has knocked out most of the world's population. Eve is in a school with 200 orphans who have been promised these lives of when they graduate of becoming teachers and artists. But on the eve of their graduation, Eve learns of the school's true purpose and of the horrifying fate that awaits her. So she flees the only home that she has ever known and sets off to survive. I liked this one a lot more than I thought I would, even though it follows some of the similar storylines of some other dystopian books. I thought the ending of this one was done really well, and I think I breezed through all of these within like 3 days on audiobook. I just did one every day because they were like short 8 or 9 hour audios. So I really had a good time with this one. Next, we have The Gray Seer by Kim Liggett, YA standalone novel. In Garner County, girls are told that they have the power to lure men from their bed and to drive women mad with jealousy. This is the potent essence of girls on the verge of womanhood. woods. So on their 16th year, they are banished to release their magic into the wild, and they can return purified and ready for marriage. So they send all these 16-year-old girls for 1 year into this particular part of the woods. It kind of has like a Lord of the Flies vibe to it. This one is darker and grittier, but the twists in here are really unique, and the ending was super surprising, and it's one that's kind of stuck with me. Okay, next we have Hungry, and I have a copy of this somewhere, but my house is kind of a disaster right now, so I cannot find it. This is a YA standalone dystopian that I really love. It's very silly, but I had such a good time with it, and I thought it was such a fun ride, and I just gobbled it right up. So we're in the future where food is no longer necessary until Thalia begins to feel something uncomfortable and unfamiliar. She's hungry. In Thalia's world, food is no longer a thing. Everyone takes medication known as Enox to ward off hunger. It should mean that there's no more famine, no more obesity, and no more foodborne illness. At least that's what her parents who work for the company that developed Enox say. But when Thalia meets a boy who is part of an underground movement to bring food back, Thalia realizes that most people live a life much different from hers, and worse, she's beginning to feel more and more hungry. I just really loved this one. I had a really good time with it. It was a bit on the silly side, but overall it was really neat. It had a cute romance, good character development, and I enjoyed it. A completely different style is The Coldest Girl in Coldtown by Holly Black. One of my favorite books ever. This is a YA standalone. This is set in the future of our world where vampires exist, and they have just come into our world, and we have to deal with the aftermath of this situation. Because of this, the government has designated cold towns for the vampires to stay and live in, but society is always curious about these cold towns and wanting to go to them. They have to keep out the humans and also continually hunt down the vampires to put them in these cold towns and keep them regulated. Becoming a vampire is kind of like a virus. If you get bit, you have to be quarantined and moved to the cold town that kind of sweeps over the nation. And one morning our main character Tana is at a party and she wakes up surrounded by the corpses of her friends. So we have a really great one for spooky season. So unique, such a unique vampire novel, a unique twist on the dystopian world. I was obsessed with the idea of the cold towns. It was just so interesting. I love Holly Black, and this is a great one. The Kingdom by Jess Rothenberg. I read this one last year for Randomathon round 1, which was like circus theme park themed. Technically not like a true regular style dystopian, but I still feel like it fits in this category. So we have these theme parks where the princesses are all these super advanced AI robots. And when Anna meets Owen, she begins to experience emotion and feelings like she's never had before. And the park's fairy tales take a dark turn when Owen goes missing and Anna goes on the hunt to find him. So the world itself is not necessarily dystopian, but Anna being this like hybrid android AI robot, kind of discovering the world she is in is not what she thought it was, is kind of got a dystopian vibe. So unique. So good. Fantastic ending. A little murder mystery in here. I loved it. All right, these next 6 are probably like my all-time favorite ones. So we have Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This is part of an adult duology, but our main character is a teen, so it kind of has young adult vibes. I feel like it's okay for young adults as well. We are in the year 2044. The real world is a grim place, and most of the world spends their time inside of this particular video game to escape reality. This game is called The Oasis, and it has a place you can live, go to school, and do everything you can in real life. Wade always dreamed of discovering the ultimate lottery ticket that lies concealed within the Oasis world, as its creator has hidden a series of fiendish puzzles that lead to a massive reward. For years, millions have struggled fruitlessly to try and find this special treasure, and Wade finally thinks he might be on the case. So we live in this universe where there are these stacks, where we stack like houses and trailers and things on top of each other. Everybody's kind of all compiled, but you can go to school and work and do all of these things inside this Oasis game, and it is so incredible. It's very different from the movie, which I still enjoyed, but the movie's a little bit more silly. Not that this isn't silly, but it's so good. Lots of nostalgic references to the 80s and the 90s. The audiobook in particular is absolutely phenomenal. It's done by Will Wheaton, who is an actor from Star Trek and one of my favorite narrators ever. This is such a nerdy, fun, delightful delightful time. Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Now I have only read the first 3 so far, but I plan to start rereading them and continuing on with the next set after the latest book is announced, because the first 3 are a completed trilogy and then the 4th book takes place 10 years in the future, but I believe following some of our same characters. This is such a beloved dystopian slash fantasy sci-fi series. It's got a nice blend of everything. It doesn't have the same style of dystopian vibes as the other ones that I have mentioned, and it definitely has a lot more sci-fi elements. We're in this color-coded society and Darrow is a red, a member of the lower caste. He believes he's making the world a better place for his future children. Darrow has been betrayed. Soon he realizes that humanity has already reached the surface and created a livable Mars years ago. Driven by the memory of his lost love, Darrow decides to infiltrate the Legendary Institute, a proving ground for the legendary Gold Caste, where the next generation of humanity's overlords struggle for power. This one will break you, it will excite you, it will make you feel things you've never felt before. It is written so incredibly well. I did the regular audiobooks with Tim Gerard Butler as the narrator. Absolutely phenomenal. One of the only times that I've like stopped reading it and like gone to Jeff with like my mouth open because I was shocked about the things that were happening. It is brutal. It gives me slight Hunger Games vibes, to be honest, at first, because we're in this kind of school system at some point. The books progress and get better and better and better. It is adult. There's a lot of dark content in here, but it's absolutely phenomenal. The Selection by Kiera. I was hesitant to put this in here because it is a dystopian, but it's like not a dystopian. It almost feels more historical fantasy than it does dystopian, but it technically is a dystopian world. We are set way in the future, and The Selection is a chance to live in a palace and compete for the heart of Prince Maxon. So we're in this world where everyone has a pretty hard life. We brought back like royalty being in charge. We're in this like new version of America, and there's the selection where they get people from different levels of society to compete to be basically the next future queen by marrying the prince. It definitely has a lot more to do with the romance than it does the dystopian elements, but there is darker things that happen in here. It's kind of like The Bachelor and Bridgerton, and incredibly good. Very simple and sweet, but just such a good time. Honestly, The Selection is probably one of the reasons I'm making YouTube videos. It was one of the first books that I had picked up after taking like a break from reading, and it just threw me into this whole new world of books, and I just kind of went crazy from there. I read all of them so quickly. The first 3 are a completed trilogy, and then the next 2 are following different characters set in the future that I also still really enjoyed. It is such a good one. I hope that someday we get a TV show or a movie because it's just such a fun one to follow. The Jewel by Amy Ewing. I've been wanting to share this one with you guys for so long, but I couldn't find like a category to fit it in. So this is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. I read this one during 2020 and had the best time with it. So this is the first book. It is a YA trilogy. The Jewel means wealth, the jewel means beauty, the jewel means royalty. But for girls like Violet, the jewel means servitude. Born in the marsh, Violet has been raised to work for the royalty, and she quickly learns the truths and lies that lie beneath the jewel's glittering facade. All the cruelty, the hidden violence, and the backstabbing. Violet must accept these ugly realities in order to survive, and then a forbidden romance changes everything. This one is a little bit of a difficult read, definitely a darker read, probably more similar to the Hunger Games. Harsh elements in here, definitely not like a light dystopian by any means, but this is so incredibly unique. I read these so quickly and enjoyed them so much at a time when my brain was like not focusing well on reading. These books got me through. They were so unique. I feel like they're not talked about enough. It's just such a powerful trilogy. Next is Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. One of my favorite series of all time. So this is a huge series. Technically the first trilogy is complete. Then books 4, 5, and 6 takes place a little bit in the future, but following a lot of the same characters. And then now we're getting a new series set in this world. I'm not sure how much of a crossover there is with our characters or not. I'm seriously debating rereading all of them to catch up because I love them so much. I want to dive in at any time. I have physically read almost all of them and then did the audios for almost all of them as well. Both were fantastic. Again, we're in this very controlled and regulated version of America. So we're following Juliet, and she is kind of in this cell at first, not really knowing what she's being kept for, but her touch has the ability to kill, and the government wants to use her as a weapon. And I don't want to say too much more because it gives it away, but this has some sci-fi elements to it. It's got some fantasy elements, some dystopian elements, some fighting the government elements, and epic romance. Like, so good. I can't even tell you what because it spoils certain things, but I feel like the romance and the characters are why you go into these because they're just so addicting. Once you get to books like 4 and on, they definitely get a little out there and crazy, but you just got to be in it for a good time and a fun time, and don't take it too seriously. So absolutely love it. Can't recommend it enough. And lastly, we have Scythe by Neil Shusterman. Another one I don't get to recommend to you guys enough. Another all-time favorite trilogy, like possibly my second or third favorite of all time. Like, I think about these books all the time. I love them so much. I read them with my husband via audio. The audiobooks are absolutely phenomenal. I do recommend speeding them up as I do all audiobooks, but especially these because the narrator does have a much slower cadence than other narrators. So we are in this world where we have basically figured out how to have a utopian society and nobody dies. Like, we know how to cure every illness and disease, as well as how to reset. So when you're in your 80s, if you're kind of tired of being old, you can reset and go back to looking like you're 20, start over, have a second family. Because of this, we have a surplus population and that has to be dealt with. So the government has instilled Scythe, which go through, supposed to be like a random lottery and kill a certain amount of people every year. They are supposed to do this with grace and understanding and seriousness, but not malice. In this book, we are following 2 Scythe apprentices, Rowan and Citra, and they are training under one of the Scythes. Neither one of them wants this job and they are very resentful of it, but you get to learn all the ins and outs of this world, how things work. The way that things are done is so well thought out and well explained. It makes total sense, honestly, in a scary way, and it's just such an interesting world. Again, definitely not a light read, but I loved it. There's a lot of training elements and friendship elements. There is a neat little romance in here. The characters are incredibly lovable. One of the only series that has made me cry, and I just thought it was absolutely phenomenal. So it is a must read. Okay, you guys, hit me up with whatever you think is a dystopian style emoji if you made it this far. Let me know if any of these are also your favorites or what your favorite dystopian novel is in case I haven't read it yet. I'm always looking to read a couple every year. I just find most of them like so engaging but also easy to follow. Let me know if you like this style of a favorites video as I can do more of them in the future. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at @TheBrightSideGirl if you haven't already, as I post a lot of bookish content over there, and hit subscribe as well as I post 2 videos a week. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys next time on The Bright Side.